Hi there. So this is going to be a bit ad-libbed, but essentially I want to do a demo to demonstrate firstly commercial banking experience, secondly the design of a data warehouse, thirdly a way to develop quickly in SQL Server and create a data schema, and fourthly talk about other things. So if you can remember all those things, let's get started. So I will drag over here a demo that I've put up together before. And it's been a while, so bear with me. But within there, we should have, the demonstration of the design, and also we should have some photos of the design. And this is the photo I want to show you. And essentially, you can see that what we want to do is produce regulatory reports based off the business of commercial banking. So commercial banking has various forms of assets that are managed. That can be cash, it can be deposits, it can be loans, it can be bonds, it can be equities or shares, loan commitments, derivatives. You can have tangible and intangible assets, tax assets, other assets. And on the liability side, we make provisions for if things goes wrong. We have tax liabilities and other liabilities. We also have the capital that's required to manage the business to be kept back. So we have a fair value reserve, we have retained earnings reserve, outstanding shares reserves, redirection reserves and other reserves. And essentially collateral exists on an accounting balance sheet to ensure that should a counterparty default, then the assets offered up as collateral could be used to honour the agreement between two parties. And so essentially all this stuff is going on in commercial banking, and there are regulatory requirements to produce reports such as liquidity reports, etc., off this base data. So my job was to come in and understand how this works. I was working with I was subcontracting to a consultancy. I was basically working with some finance grads who were based in Amsterdam and some developers who were based in London. And essentially what we did was the finance guys modeled using UML how the commercial banking assets that I've just described worked. And I had to understand everything they'd done in relatively short time frames. I had to design the data schema of a Kimball data warehouse. I had to liaise with the development team in order to get my design implemented and auto-generated through stored procedures and BIML in the case of SSIS, so it was all on premise. And essentially that, and then I had to go to the actual client and discuss the detail really to make sure that the design was adequate and correct and work with real data and all the rest of it, and of course satisfy their requirements. So there was a lot to do. Now, the development team in London was excellent, I have to say. So they basically took care of generating the warehouse literally from the schema I provided them. And there were some junior testers and everything to make sure it all worked, and it did. And they managed the source control and the continuous delivery and all of that. So that was taken off my hands. But there was still a lot to do on the data architecture side. And it needed doing quickly, because for all the finance grads had done a great job. They were learning as they went. Specifying the solution in UML was not sufficient. We obviously needed a data schema and a Kimball data warehouse design. It had to be concrete. And in order to translate from one to the other, fill in the gaps and work with the end client business to make sure that what we designed really did deliver what they needed in terms of both the base data warehouse and the BI reports on top. These things have to be right. So there's a lot of work to do, and essentially it had to be super agile because of short time frames. When I joined, we'd set up the procedures to auto-generate the warehouse. So at a click of a button, we could do that. But really, the thing hadn't been designed beyond a UML model. So I had to work fast, and I had to work agile, and I had to be able to support change. So instead of doing it slowly in an enterprise data arc tool, given we were targeting SQL Server anyway, I chose to use database diagrams in SQL Server and my own kind of source control system, not very rigorous, not using Git, but just super fast. And that's what I'm going to demonstrate today. And it allowed me to control change of the design in a very agile way and really work very quickly. And I also point out that I successfully got Marcel head around some quite complex concepts, obviously derivatives, exotic options and the like are non-trivial, and I had to pick that up in detail, as well as make sure that the warehouse I designed could deliver the pretty well specified and absolute regulatory reports. These canned reports had to do what they had to do, right, in order to meet the regulations. So both regulatory experience was demonstrated and the ability to pick up finance fast. And so yes, that's what I'm now going to demonstrate now is the warehouse, which is kind of this layer, and how I implemented it in SQL Server. So let's get straight to it. So again, come back into this demo, data arc, design, and I'm hoping this is all going to work because it will make for a better demo. So essentially what I do is within SQL, I have some create schema statements, some create table statements. So here we're creating the table dim date and the table dim date period. Here we've got the base layer, so we're creating some dim accounts, dim geography, dim party role, dim counterparty, fact collateral, we mentioned collateral earlier, various other concepts that become important like seniority of debt and things like that. So it's basically modeling the whole thing. So we've got our create tables, and then we've also got create stored procedures to do the actual stuff. Of course, I was feeding into the logic of the load, but the other guys were coding the load and auto-generating it based on source to target mappings that I designed and wrote up in some detail, even sometimes providing them with sample stored procs. So that's why there's not many stored procs there, because it's really a database schema design. But I did have some insert into tables. For instance, dim date, I actually created and populated. And I think dim date I then updated. So I did generate the date dimension. There's some functions as backup. I can't remember what it was, something on the date. And then I got some post-deployment scripts, and you'll see these later. There might be my utility scripts where basically I do stuff with database diagrams. So you can see that across all of this as I build up the schemas, the tables, any stored procedures, any insert statements, etc. I basically have one file per object appropriately stored under the directory system. And what that means is that I can change the code, say for the date table. Let's choose something else because I mentioned date. Let's go to, say, I don't know, I mentioned derivatives. So here we are. So there's a bunch of derivative tables. And if we take one at random, I can open that. I want to do it with WordPad, sorry, with Notepad. Anyway, choose another app. We'll just do it with WordPad, that's fine. So yeah, so therefore, of course, I could drop this into SQL Server. That'd be a much better way of doing it. Let's get SQL Server up. So give me a second. It's loading on the other screen. And here it is. Wonderful. So I am hoping that this is going to work. I have a terrible feeling that at the end of the demo, I've got a problem on my local system and the database diagrams aren't going to work, which is really annoying because if that's the case, it's kind of the most impressive bit of the demo. But it is what it is, so we'll just try and carry on. But my point really is, at the moment, at this point of the demo, we've got one table per SQL, sorry, one file per SQL object. So I can drop that into SQL Server as per here. And if I wanted to add a column in design, well, that would be easy. I'll just do an extra column. So it's an integer. There you go. And so the point is it's very, very maintainable, just like with source control, right? It's just on my file system. Now, the point is I want to be able to deploy it very easily, completely fresh as well. So I'm just going to remind myself what the database is called. So it's called design. There you go. Which made sense, right? I was designing. So there we are. We've got a design database. So I'm going to delete that so we're clean. Right click. Delete. Close existing connections, and design is gone, and I'm going to recreate it. So I'll have an empty database. Design. So now we have this empty database, and I can show you the generation process at least. So if we go back to design, on here you can see I've got a bunch of PowerShell scripts, 2 in fact. I've got a couple of text files and some SQL scripts. The SQL scripts are my output, so I'm going to delete those, again, resetting it. So I'm wanting to generate a load of tables in here. Now you can see at the moment there aren't any. It's a bit slow. Anyway, there you go, it's empty. So what I basically do is in the text file for the corresponding PowerShell, I list all the SQL objects, all the SQL files that I need to run in the order that I need to run them. And what the PowerShell script will do is it will read this file and it will look up this file and append it to the output, and then it will look at this file and concatenate that on the bottom, then this file concatenate that all the way down. That's all this PowerShell script does. And I'll show you that just by, I mean, it's just hacked together, but if I just open with PowerShell. And we have that over here, but trust me, that's what it does. And you'll see that because it will generate a SQL file as output. So I'm now going to run this with PowerShell, and it should spit out a SQL file in here. And if I drag this over here, you can see it's doing that, and it's done that. So hopefully now we have this SQL file. And the same for this, the dim date. I separated it out just because it was complicated code, but you always create your data dimension first, and just for modularizing my effort, because this is just lots and lots of tables thinking about the design. quite simple code. This was more complicated code, but only one table. So I just stuck it in its own solution, but same principle, run with PowerShell. I think there's a little bug in my first line, but that doesn't matter. It's not affecting everything. It is doing what I'm saying. So, and that's all that we need is we just need this file. So if we drop that in there, you can see it's using the empty design database and it will generate our date dimension. So I'm going to click on that, pause and go and get a glass of water while it starts running. Bear with me. Now, I think that this takes like 15 minutes to run and populate, but it generates a full day dimension. And if we refresh these tables, come on, you can see it's created dim date. And if I select from dim date, you can see that it's populated between the dates I mentioned from 2010 right away down to, I thought it would go, oh, it was on the top 1000. If I select all the rows and run that again, from 1st of the 1st 2010 right the way down to 2055. Fine. So just standard date dimension, calendar day of year, calendar quarter, calendar month name, calendar day of month, etc. And eventually, according to the logic of the business, it will populate the same for their financial accounts, so their financial year, which doesn't always run on the calendar year, start date, end date, etc. So that is being populated. If I just go back to top 100, I think some of that should, or yeah, you can see it's populating out. And when it finishes after 15 minutes, it'll do the whole thing. Anyway, I would normally obviously let it finish. It runs in order if it was generating the real warehouse, but just in the interest of time, we've got the structure of dim date here. We can see it and it's got its columns, and that is enough for the second script that I generated to also run. So I'm going to run that now. So I'll drop that in here and we execute that script, and that should run quite quickly. I hope it works. I think it will. It's been about 5 years since I last ran this. Seems all right. Although I thought it might have finished by now. Why is it not finished? How are we doing? Let's see. If we refresh tables, everything looks like it's like, there you go. So it's just finished. It's locked, released. There you go. It's generated an entire data warehouse from the source code. Not rocket science, but there you go. Now, this is a bit that should be nice and impressive. I'm getting a problem, which is really annoying because I'll probably have to redo the whole demo. Why is it not allowing me to create database diagrams? Let's see if I can fix it quickly, in which case I look good. And if I can't, I'll redo it so I don't look bad. Right. Stack Overflow usually knows what it's on about. That doesn't look like me. Database diagram error. I mean, this is looking like a security problem, right? Error number. Oh, how annoying. Okay, so we just go back here and give that for help. Look at that. Always read your errors. Quick look.
Hello YouTube, welcome back to another tutorial. Today I'm going to be showing you how to connect your database diagram. So I'm going ahead and open my SQL Studio, and I'm about to connect. But before I connect, I want to show you something. So if you, under the server name, if you click Browse for More, you collapse here and then click Browse for More. And then under your local servers, if you check under the database engine, you see here, this is my computer name that is registered under the database engine. So if I connect here, I should be able to connect without any problem. Now, if you want to create your database diagram, just go ahead and open the database that you want to create with the respective tables. So if I click here, you should be able to see the corresponding tables to this database. So if you click on the database diagram, and then right click, and then click on new database diagram, there's this error 15.4.
Right, that's our error. Right, I think
obtain the MTL computers, etc., etc. It has to do with the exit directory or Windows group or user not being found by SQL. The user has been previously registered, but for some reason it's no longer accessible or not found by the database engine. So how to fix this is to connect as a system administrator. How do you do that? You go to Tenants, or rather you go to your database. In my case, it's the tenant database, and then you click on Properties, and then you go to Files, and then you see that this owner here was my previously, it was the owner that was created when I installed SQL Server, right? But I decided to change it because it was too long, didn't like it. It was created by default when I installed Windows. So I said go with the one that you saw at the beginning of the video when I showed you that the username or the name that is registered under the database engine is my name rather. But this name still exists amongst the owners because it was created by Windows and it was registered when I installed. Now it's no longer accessible. So to fix the error, you can simply click on here.
Change owner.
Then browse. Then scroll down until you see SA, System Administrator. And when you're elevating the privileges, then you can then be able to access certain privileges that this user no longer has. So click OK, and then OK. Then you come back to the database diagram, right click, new database diagram, and there you go. Okay,
start.
Thanks so much for watching.
Thank you.
If you like this video, like and subscribe for more videos.
Where are we?
See you next time.
I'll just put it here for now. Add page. That's useful. So let's see if we can fix it and then continue the demo. So hopefully I'll keep that up because I'm terrible at remembering what thing is. So what did he say? He basically said, okay, we got the same error. So I want to see the database owner. So right click, come on. Sorry, my mouse is playing up a bit today. Being a wireless mouse, right? I think that's it. No. Right click, come on, properties. So now in properties, was it files he went through? Yeah, there you go, that's the owner. Browse. Right, okay, so what have we got? So I'll just do what he did and hope it works, right? So okay. And literally, this is a problem with the install of the product. This is nothing to do with my demo, right? You saw before when I right-click and tried to do a new database diagram, I got the error. All I'm trying to do is fix that so I can show you the next thing. So new database diagram. Yes, this looks good. Phew, I can keep the video. It's the best work for me. Right. Cool. So now we can add our diagrams. But the important thing is they're now accessible. And this is what I want to show you. So because I've done it before, I already created a load of diagrams to go with a load of tables. And then I figured out using SQL management objects how to export those diagrams to a binary file that can then be re-imported. And so essentially I could back up not only the tables and the design, namely this, but also these diagrams. And the diagrams really are very important because that's how you talk to the business, right? That's how I got away from needing to use a proper data arc tool, which enabled me to work faster. Of course, there are data arc tools. I know Irwin Enterprise Spark is another one. We had our UML in Enterprise Spark, but we didn't have our data schemas in an Enterprise Spark because I did them this way in SQL Server. And it was quicker because once we'd coded the tables, those tables could be fed into the auto generation and everything just took care of itself. You know, it knew which files to pick up, it knew which SSIS packages to generate. Can't take the credit for that. Some very good developers working with me to build that, but I can take the credit for this bit. I also am not going to hold it against myself that my machine's a bit slow. Sorry about that. So we've generated the tables, and now we want to generate diagrams to show the design and how all these tables relate to each other. So here we are. We go into the SQL, and in utility scripts, you will see I've got database diagram maintenance process because I always forget it. It tells me how to do it. Whilst I say I forget it, I kind of know it. Just bear with me if I get it wrong a couple of times. Don't think it's that complicated. So there's a manual process to back up and there's a manual process to reinstall. And essentially, I think what I need to do is, first of all, I create a table in the dev utility schema, which doesn't exist at the moment. It probably does. The schema probably exists. So I'm hoping I can run this, execute that, and then we should see our empty table. And the reason I have to do that is it won't let me just insert binary into the system table that actually stores the database diagrams. So sys diagrams? I think so. When we created the database diagrams, it created this sys table. And really we want to put the definition, the binary, in here in the sys diagram tables because that's what makes all the diagrams work. But SQL Server won't let you do that, so I create this table, which is basically literally a mirror of that. I populate this table, and then I select from this table into that table, and it will let me do that, and then everything works. So that's really the process. So now that I've created this table, and I've refreshed the tables, I'm hoping we see that. I might not have done the refresh. That's just a bug in SQL Server. Unless you refresh, it won't show new tables. But here we are. So there it is. And we can see that I've got an empty table. Cool. Right. And then basically to export pre-existing diagrams from the last cut of the development, I generated this script. Oh no, I generated, sorry, there we are. I generated this script. It does insert direct, sorry, but to export, right, so to export, I had to create that. And then yeah, that's right, it wouldn't generate insert scripts. It wouldn't generate this insert script from this system table. So what I had to do, because when you do right click, task, generate scripts, it literally doesn't give you that system table to select. So because you haven't got it, I selected from that into this table, and that then allowed me to generate this script from that table. And this is the binary that is actually the database diagram image. So when we now run this post deploy script, so I've created all my tables, and then I run this, and that worked, we now have those values in this table. And that has basically regenerated the last state of all my database diagrams. And so now if I refresh the database diagrams, this is a nice bit, ka-ching, we've got a load of diagrams. So we can look at the derivatives diagram. And what you'll see essentially is that this is my data warehouse with cuts and views of the entire data warehouse in SQL Server, generated as quickly as I just showed you. In fact, quicker, because you wouldn't normally have to fix the problems or describe what I was doing. So I'd just be like, edit my SQL scripts, update the design. Having updated the design, regenerate the PowerShell, delete the database, rerun the PowerShell, rerun the SQL that the PowerShell generates, and rerun that post-deploy script, and ka-ching, I'll have an updated data schema. And what's more is the developers could use this to automatically extract the metadata of my design as input to their stored procedures to automatically generate the entire warehouse. So it's pretty clever. I was quite pleased with my bit, mainly because it worked. And doing it, it's a non-trivial commercial banking data warehouse. That's really the point of the demo, is both the way that I did it and the complexity of what I designed. So that's really the end of the demo. I am just going to open a couple more diagrams just to sort of give a better feel for, so we've got the bonds. There's an account for any bond, and etc., etc. And the party, you've got counterparties, right? There's two parties. Someone sells a bond, someone buys a bond. So they're in here, ditto with the derivatives. You can take deposits, you can handle loans. So everything's properly modeled, and all the data types are right, etc., etc. And basically, this data warehouse is just lots of Kimball data warehouses for each and every one. And I basically designed and built and delivered this in about 6 months, start to finish. So I was quite pleased with it. And that's really it. So that is a demonstration of the implementation of the design we started with at the start. So you can see for real that I really did design and build this thing. And you'll notice that there's an aggregate layer of data, ag layer. That was quite important, of course, because we're aggregating all this base data into the data that's needed for the appropriate reports. By financial instrument type. So yeah, that's basically what I did, and I think that demonstrates that capable of coming in and understanding the business, particularly in finance, got a maths degree, etc. Capable of doing a proper data warehouse design and innovating on the job as necessary to get the job done when timescales are short. So that's pretty much everything, I think. Yeah, so what did we cover? I think I had four points, 4 being other things. So yeah, we've covered designing a commercial data warehouse and expanding on my role subcontracted to Reply for Mizuho. We've covered the procedure for designing fast in SQL Server as a one-man band. And obviously this stuff could be moved into a proper data architecture tool at the right point. And similarly, could be moved into source control. That's exactly what we did as it stabilized. As the design came to fruition, we didn't keep using my method. We had a cut-off point where we then pointed Git at SQL Server, pulled in all the code, and then managed it through GitHub. So you don't do this forever, but it was a very good way of doing this, of designing quickly. And yeah, that said, so yeah, that's pretty much it. Now, other things is one thing I'm quite interested in is, say, regulation. So I also work for a company called Cube who built their own product, and that product basically is great. It's a Reg Tech product. So let me just look at this. So Cube.global, there we go. Yeah, and basically their platform, they keep track of every regulation across data, cyber, domain specific. They target the banks, so financial regs across every jurisdiction in the world, and they get those PDFs or whatever other format it is, scraping the web, whatever. They generally get them to PDFs and then they load them from PDFs. They do OCR on them to turn them into structured hierarchies, because when you think about a document, it has chapters, and then it has sections, and then it has subsections, and each of those subsections gets loaded into a text field within a structured hierarchy, the hierarchy being the contents of the document. And having done that, you can then create your own taxonomies and match the taxonomies to each document. And then you enable something, doing all this in SQL Server on premise to start with. I'm sure they've moved on, but essentially pretty clever stuff, because then you essentially created a data catalog, right? And then they put regulatory reporting on it. Highly recommended. Learned a lot while I was at Cube, but it also means I've got ideas around how you can turn regulatory documents into data. And some of the jobs I've been looking at have that requirement. And so I think putting together my experience at Cube with my experience at Mizuho in commercial banking puts me in very good stead to design a data warehouse that can support turning your regulatory documents into data for an individual company, and then doing whatever compliance procedures you want to do on that data. I'm not going to give any IP away, so I'm not going to tell you exactly how Cube achieve all that. But I did want to show experience and competence in that domain, in the hope that someone out there has a job and would be interested in talking to me to become a data architect. And I would suggest that the data itself is non-trivial, clearly. I'm sure whoever's hiring would want someone who already knows the domain, but at the end of the day, it's readable and doable. That's probably a hit of a month or two, absolute max. I can get my head around the regs and what they mean. That's not really the challenging bit. The challenging bit is to, in reasonable time, build and get developers to deliver a data warehouse that enables the end goal, which is to turn manual regulation checking into searchable, queryable compliance checking, where the regulatory data is treated as data as a first-class citizen and represented as such in order to improve compliance processes by automating it and enabling AI, etc., to be put on top. I think I can do that. The way I'm sure a lot of people would like to do it straight into the cloud. I would actually advise there's nothing wrong with starting on-prem, because in actual fact, even if you get an expert in, you're not going to get this stuff right first time. You're going to be prototyping. So by doing it in 2 phases, you essentially get to trial it, proof of concept it, but for real, on an on-premise system using techniques I've used in the past. And that allows for quicker delivery, frankly, than trying to set everything up in the cloud and get all the permissions. And we can do that in parallel. We can build and design and investigate what an eventual cloud solution should look like. And we can prototype that with continuous delivery, etc. And then we can port the on-premise solution into the cloud and put AI and data science and all that jazz on top. And I think, yes, it might take a bit longer, and it might be a bit more expensive, but that's how you end up with a real solution that works, because you'll get the data right as well as the cloud right by separating those concerns. And it's not easy, this stuff. So rather than, aim for the silver bullet of all in Azure working first time, and then iterating, going around in circles, getting it wrong, having an imperfect product at the end that took even longer than just doing it twice. First one's your prototype, you learn the lessons, you learn the data, you learn the business, and then when you move it to the cloud, you fix the problems with the on-prem one, and hey presto, you've got your solution. So that is how I would go about this task. So I hope the video's proved interesting enough to see through to the end, and if it has, I hope this encourages you to interview me. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Stop. How do I stop recording? There we go.